All right, good afternoon, everyone. So here we are continuing in our discussions of database management systems, and we are continuing on into database analysis. So, but first, a couple of things that I do want to mention. Well, first quote of the day, of course. So Blaise Pascal, which maybe some of you guys know, is a famous scientist, also considered the father of modern day computer science. He brings us an interesting quote for today. It's not really a technical quote, but it's something that's interesting for me. All men's miseries derive from not being able to sit in a quiet room alone. And I think it's interesting that we see that in practice today a lot with how many things there are to distract us, right? That I was actually listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about this new medical condition that they're finding. They're calling it text neck, which is people who are having many neck issues and spinal issues from staring down like this too much during the day from spending time on their phones. So let's try to be able to keep our heads up and be able to look at the beauty of the world around us and not necessarily have to spend all of our time looking down at a piece of technology that's distracting us from the beauty of what is all around us. All right. Let me also tell you that I've gotten a number of requests for projects. Good. So this is the most updated. This is the most updated list. Again, those with a line through it are no longer available. The ones that are highlighted or the text color is red are those that one group has already taken that topic, so it can only be available to one other group. I've sent out the messages to those who are not in a group yet. If you received a message from me that you are not in a group, it means that I have not received an email from someone that had either from you or from someone with you CC'd on the email saying that you were a part of a group. So if you think that you are part of a group, you have agreed with someone, another group of students to be a part of a group, and you're like, why did I receive this message from you, Hojam? Then it means probably I've had a number of students who have sent me an email and saying this is our group and listed people in the email, but didn't CC them on the email like I instructed. So make sure that you find out if that's the case, if you received a message from me. I still have 15 students who have not been put into a group. Okay, I'm going to make a text announcement about this as well, that if you are a single student who you've tried to find a group, I need you to message me. Okay, I need you to message me by the end of the day tomorrow to set, that would be the end of the day. What's today, the 29th? Okay, so you need to message me by the end of the day on the 30th of March, Thursday, saying that you have tried to find a group and you want to be in a group. Okay, because what I will do is I will make a group out of any students who have said that. Anyone else that's not contacting me, I'm just going to have to at this point assume that you are not paying attention, that you are not wanting to be a part of a group. But finally, one other thing. Some of you might be thinking that you are just going to reuse your group project grade from a previous semester. If you received a message from me, it means that I did not get a request from you to use a previous project grade. So I'm not planning on using your previous project grade. Okay, so make sure you contact me if you're in that situation. All right. So again, there are like 15 of you, which is quite a high number for this late in the game. All right, so we need to make sure we get all the groups set up and well, so you guys can start working on your semester project. All right. Are there any questions about that? Maybe you can message me privately, and we can try to figure out the situation. All right, let's see. Where are we? Database analysis. All right. So we're going to talk about fact-finding techniques. So this isn't necessarily, by the way, this set of slides, it's not necessarily specific to database development. Remember, a database is part of a system, right? It's not the only part of a system. And all of the things in this set of slides that we're going to be talking about is going to be things that are going to be useful for the development of any system or multiple parts of the system. So not just the database, but other parts as well. So we'll talk about fact-finding techniques and some of the advantages and disadvantages of the different fact-finding techniques so that we can understand how to model the system and how to create the system. All right. We want to capture necessary facts, right? Because we want to make sure that we know what we are building. Okay. Using really good design and using really good implementation tools and tasks to be able to create a great system is useful. But it might be pointless if we're building the wrong thing, right? So we need to make sure that we understand what it is that we are building. Okay, so we're going to use fact-finding techniques to be able to understand what the requirements are and the preferences. And we can't always rely simply on our customer or our client to tell us what it is that they want. We need to work with them, definitely need to work with them, right, to determine what it is that they need. But sometimes customers think they know what they want and what they need is somewhat different. Sometimes they might not tell us everything that's necessary because they may not know about everything that's necessary. For example, if I were to build the OBS system, if I were to say, okay, I'm going to build this system for grading and for scheduling classes and stuff like that at a university, and if I went and talked to all the professors, okay, I talked to the rector, the deans of all the faculties, I talked to all the professors and the chairs and all of those things, all those people to find out what they need in the OBS system, but I don't talk to any students. I'm probably going to miss out on some key parts of the system that the students use and need, but the professors might not commonly use. The same would be also true if I talked to all the students and didn't talk to any of the teachers, right? So the thing is, we don't just necessarily listen to just one customer liaison or one customer representative to find out what it is that they think they need. There are other techniques that we will use that will have advantages over specifically just asking the customer to tell us what it is that they think they need. Okay. All right. So we're going to, again, use fact-finding techniques throughout the life cycle, right? We're going to use the different techniques that we're going to talk about. We're going to use it to learn about the different terminology. What words do our customer use to describe parts of their system? What are some of the problems? More than likely, well, let me just say this. If we are updating an existing system, there are problems that exist with the current system, right? No matter what, if the current system is working perfectly, there's really no need for the customer to be seeking a new solution, right? There is some problem with the current system. Truth is, there's always a problem with every system, right? No system is perfect, right? And so we can learn about what it is that they are trying to make sure does not get carried over into the new system, right? Some of the constraints that might exist. Remember, we talked about data constraints and ways that different data and values that it can be and things like that, requirements. And we can also understand, we'll get into this, I can also understand views. What types of things are different users of the system going to need as part of what they do with their daily life, right? All right, so this is a lot of text. Let me see what specifically in here I want to kind of focus in on. Database planning, some of the examples, mission statement and objectives. The mission statement is going to tell us the core part of why it is that this system needs to exist. It's going to tell us probably some of the main tables even that may exist. Let's see. Right, so prototyping here. Right, when we create a prototype, we talked about that last week. We can use that to modify our understanding of the requirements and specifications for the system. That's going to be a useful thing, because if we show them a prototype, there are going to probably be things about it that they like. There's going to be some things that they do not like. As a result, we can modify those things to be able to change for the final version. Okay, in a sense, prototyping is like if you've ever heard of what's called a test screen audience for a film, for a movie. They show movies, you know, Marvel movies and all those, Disney and all the different films, the DC movies. I'm using a lot of superhero stuff because that's what my kids are into. But they show those films to a test screen audience, to a small group of people, and then those people tell the filmmakers what they liked and what they didn't like, and the filmmakers will go back and make changes based upon those things, right? That's like a prototype. So they see it, they say, oh, this is what we don't like, this is what we do like, and then that can help us understand how to build the final system. Let's see. Right. Some examples of fact-finding techniques that we will use as we're going to examine documentation. It's going to be very useful for us to understand how the system exists and how it can be used. Right. We can use interviewing, right, where we sit down with the users of the system or the potential users of the system to understand what it is that they have need from the system that we're developing. We can observe the organization, right? We can do our own research. This is very helpful, right? To understand if there are problems that we are trying to solve. If they've already been solved, then we don't have to, old saying, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? In some of these situations. Questionnaires are similar to interviewing with a key difference, and we'll talk about why interviewing might be better than questionnaires, why questionnaires might be better than interviewing in some situations. Okay. Okay, so first one we're going to talk about. We're going to examine the documentation. All right. We can gain insight. Why did we need this database to exist? Why do we need this database system to exist? Right, we're going to identify any parts of the organization that could be associated with the problem we are trying to solve. We're going to understand the current system as it exists, right? And so therefore we can understand the things that need to continue on. There are going to be some aspects of the current system that will need to continue. There may be some aspects of it that need to be halted. So some examples of sources of documentation, memos and emails. All right, so you'll see emails between two users of the system, right? We can see complaints in those emails, right? We can also see employee or customer complaints that are specifically given, right? Let's see. We can have things that describe the current system, such as a data dictionary or different flowcharts and diagrams for how the system is used. User training manuals. Those can definitely be helpful for us to understand how the system should be used or how the system is currently used as it exists. Right, we can also, as part of the development of a replacement system, we can, one of the things we can usually end up doing is updating those user manuals. Right? But these are things where we can get information about the system. So let's see, a mission statement could be, we talked about that pretty much in depth last time, right? So to understand some of the core components of the system. So for example, let's see here. All right. So I'm going to pull up a, let's do this. I'm going to pull back up the let's see. Hopefully you guys remember this text here, right? So this was Athens University mission statement. So a system that may be useful in supporting the university, right? Let's see. Well, this wasn't as good as I was hoping for, because what I was wanting was to get some nouns in here that might tell us what tables we might include, right? So let's see. This one isn't quite as good as I thought it would be. In terms of, it's a good mission statement. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I was looking for something that would have like some good nouns. Let's see. Let's see if I can find another one. Okay, let's see. I'm going to give you another one here. It's not a mission statement, but I'll give you another one here. Okay, so there's a lot of text. I'm going to share this. I'll share this in the the university that I received my PhD from, and where my wife received her licence or undergraduate from. All right, I'll share this in our team chat there. Now, the reason why I want to show this is because there are some things that we can understand of what through the purpose of what the organization exists for, can help us understand the things that we are tracking, the information that we're tracking. So for example, students, right? So students shows up a number of times, as we can see here, right? So we can think that there will be a table, a student table, where we're keeping information about our students, right? What else? Development of research, right? So research may be something we may have. What research is our faculty, our teachers involved in, right? So we may have, we're tracking that information. Faculty, right? Partners, right? These are all things that we are going to be tracking the information of that. And then the nouns in some of the description of what the purpose of the organization is going to tell us what some of the things that we are tracking, and therefore what our tables possibly tables, possibly attributes within those tables are going to be the kinds of things that we are tracking. Okay, and right. And so when we start getting into the implementation of our database, when we start getting into the design phases, this will help us understand what things should we include, right? What tables should we have? What columns should we have in those tables? Okay, but we're going to look through all of this information. Let me also make sure to mention that when I say that these are the different types of fact-finding techniques, I'm not saying that we're going to use all of these types of fact-finding techniques, right? Sometimes we're going to use more than others, right? Sometimes we're going to not use some of the fact-finding techniques. It's just a matter of that these are some of the different ways that we can get information about the system that we're trying to develop. Okay. In fact, I would say, for your group project, for example, documentation, and we'll get into one later called research. Those are two examples of fact-finding techniques that you will likely use, right? Some of these others, like interviewing and questionnaires, you might not use those as much for your group project because you're not going to, for some of you, you won't have access to the types of, you won't have access to the people that you would need to interview or to send questionnaires to. Okay, if that makes sense. All right, but basically documentation is anything written, drawn, that it helps us understand how to design the system that we are trying to develop. Okay, so these are just some of the examples of the types of documentation we would try to get to understand the system. Okay. Now, interviewing is another common tool. So here we take the time to sit down with users or employees of the organization, right, to be able to understand how they use the system. We can find out facts that we don't already know. We can use it to verify facts about how the system works. So let's say that we have some idea of how the system works based upon the documentation that we've collected, right? And we can talk to the users to say, is this how it works, right? So for example, let's say, I'll give you an example of one where many of you probably have never had to use a system for getting an ECOMET, a residence permit here for foreigners. So maybe there is one or two foreigners in this class, I don't know. But there's a website that you can go to, right? And you enter into your information to be able to lodge an application to go into the Göç İdaresi, which is actually really close to the university, right? And you can basically go through the website to put in all your information, to get an application, to get an appointment, to go in there and turn in all of the documents that you need to turn in. Okay. Now, there is a common problem that some people have experienced where if you enter all of your information in through the English version of the site, so the website, because it's intended for foreigners to use, the website, you can create your application in Turkish, you can create it in English, you can create it in Russian, and there's a fourth, but I can't remember what it is. Is it German? Can't remember. Maybe I can look it up. All right, but there's 4 languages you can enter it into. If you enter in your information in English and you progress through the site entering your information in English, there is one point in the site where there's some error that exists, or at least existed. I don't know if it still does. All right, where If you go to click submit, it just comes up with pops up some error was encountered, and it won't allow you to continue. Okay. If you do the same process in the Turkish version of the site, then you can flow through fine, right? And there's no problem. So if if someone were to look up the user manual or a user guide for using this website, and it kind of processes you through how to get through the process of submitting an application, right? It wouldn't, if it was done based on the Turkish side, it would show you getting through and everything being fine. By interviewing actual users of the site, you might find out that there is an error in the English version of it. Okay. It has something, I was told it has something to do with one of the characters, some text character that isn't able to be understood or something. But so we would be able to learn that, hey, yeah, the user manual says this is how it works, but it doesn't really work that way, right? That's something that an interview could help us with, right? Another objective is we can get enthusiasm. People tend to have what we call buy-in, meaning they get excited about a system, meaning they want to use a system. We tend to get more excitement and more buy-in for a new system if the people using it feel like they were involved in its development. Okay, if we come in Monday morning Monday morning and say, here's a new system that is useful for you doing your work. A lot of times people will have the attitude of, but I like the old system, or I was used to the old system, especially if this is something that they were not talked to about or they were not brought in discussions about. And so by interviewing our future users and our customer, we can get them to be excited about this new system that is coming, right? Again, getting the end user involved, right? Identifying requirements, gathering ideas and opinions. Again, not everybody's opinion is going to be useful, right? You're going to have some people who will think the system should work one way, and some people who will think it should work a different way. All right, which one do we do? Well, somebody might be upset, right? And that's okay, but we can get an idea of what it is that the users are wanting, right? Yeah, help desk. Yeah. If there is a help desk, right, then you can talk with the help desk people, because that would help you understand what kinds of problems exist with the current system. Okay. So some advantages and disadvantages of this interviewing technique, right, is we can allow the interviewee to respond freely and openly. All right, again, allows the interviewee to feel part of the project, to give them buy-in. Follow up on interesting comments. So this one is where I'm saying, like, and along with the last one there, allowing them to observe the body language. So we'll get into questionnaires in a later slide, but we're not just looking at the words of the response, right? So for example, if you were to ask the question of, is the user interface understandable? Is the user interface understandable for the system as it exists? If we were to ask someone that question, and they were to respond, oh yes, the user interface is great, I like it. Versus if someone were to respond, I mean, the user interface is great, I guess I like it, right? Basically the same words, right? The same words were used in those two responses, but I'm going to assume that you guys understand that those two responses were very different, right? Even though I used the same words both times, the way that it was stated, the body language that I used, the tone of voice that I used, right? Those things all indicated something different based upon those two responses. That's something that we can use to our advantage if we have a good interviewer. We have to have a good interviewer, right, doing the question asking, that when they hear a response that says, I should follow up on that, right? So one of the things, one of the keys to this is that we need to be able to ask good questions, right? So not just yes or no questions like, do you like the system? Is the system easy to use? Yeah, those. I'm not saying we should avoid those questions, but those tend to be questions that we get a yes or no answer to. They don't really give us a lot of information, right? So that's where the success is dependent on the communication skills of the interviewer, which comes down to back to this over here, the adapt or reword questions during an interview. That a good interviewer, if they are saying something and the interviewee does not understand, we can use a different word. Okay, my example of not understanding the words that are used. Right, so going back to my Turkish language learning days. So in class, in our Turkish language class, we would learn the same kind of, the introductory things. Nasılsın, iyiyim, sen nasılsın, ben de iyiyim, adın ne, senin adın ne, benim adım Joseph, things like that, falan, right? And now, at one point, the question was asked in class that we learned was nerelisin, right? Nerelisin, which my response would be ben Amerikalıyım, right? That's in class I would say ben Amerikalıyım, right? And you guys, many of you on this call would say ben Turkum, right? And so I'm out at the bazaar one day, after taking a few weeks or months, I can't remember how long, but I was out at the bazaar one day and I was practicing my Turkish, feeling very confident, that I was learning some basic phrases to talk to the workers at the bazaar, right? And I walked up to one and I thought, senin adın ne? And he tells me, I don't remember, but he tells me, and he says, memleketin nedir? Right? What? What did you just say? So, and he repeats it. And I said, what? Anlamadım. Right? So then his friend who's standing there next to him knows enough to say, nerelisin. I'm like, Amerikalıyım. So I know that one, right? But the first guy, he didn't realize that I didn't understand the word he was using, right? He just thought I didn't hear well or whatever. But the second guy knew enough to know that, if I say this differently, this customer will know what I'm saying, right? And that's something that an interviewer will be able to do. When we get into it, when we talk about questionnaires, we'll learn that questionnaires don't have this ability, right? We have a written piece of text, and if the person doesn't understand what's being written, then they're just at a loss, right? They won't be able to answer the question, right? So success is dependent on the skills of that interviewer. That interviewer needs to be able to communicate well, figure out when the interviewee is not understanding something that's being said, right? Success can be dependent on the willingness of interviewees to participate. Some interviewees, some of our, remember, we're going to be interviewing our users, our employees, right? Some of them will say, this is a waste of time, I just want to be working, right? I just want to be doing my job, I have a deadline, I don't want to be doing this right now. And so that can be difficult to get good information out of someone who has that, excuse me, that attitude, right? It can be very time consuming and costly, right? Again, just like I said just now, we're going to be taking our employees away from doing their job for a while, right? For a period of time for them to do this interview, right? We're going to have to schedule it around their clock, around their schedule. We're going to have to be able to get the interviewers to come in and have time for them to be able to do what they need to do, right? So it could be impractical, right? Let's see. All right, so we'll talk also that we'll mention that there are two different types of interviews, unstructured and structured. Also, again, an open-ended question. I talked about this before about a yes or no question can be very bad in certain lawsuits if we have too many of them, right? If we give questions that have a right answer, not a right answer, because there's no real right answer in interviewing, right? But either a multiple choice or short direct responses or yes or no, then that doesn't give us as much information as open-ended questions that allow people to be able to give more information in their response. Okay. Now this is not to say that we don't use closed questions, right? Sometimes using closed questions can get someone to answer, to start feeling like they can answer questions, right? Open-ended questions will allow them to answer more, allow us to get more questions. So for example, a closed-ended question would be, let's see, in a closed-ended question might be, do you like the system? Or is the system user-friendly? Or you might even say a closed-ended question could be specific choices, could be something like which component of the OBS system is easier to use, the class add function or the messaging function or something like that, right? Open-ended questions might be, what would you say is the easiest part of the system that you use regularly and why, right? And then that way they can say, oh, you know what, the easiest one, I guess it's when I check my grades and here's why, you know, or something like that, where you allow them to expand upon a simple yes, no answer, right? Use a good mix of both open-ended and closed-ended questions. We are also going to, there's another technique. So far we've got documentation and we've got interviewing. In addition to that, we've got observing the organization, right? So we can be what we call flies on the wall, what's kind of in a American English idiom as being a fly on the wall, right? And this comes from, I don't know if you guys know this phrase about fly on the wall or if there's a Turkish equivalent, but if there was a fly in my office right now, I probably wouldn't know about it, right? If it was just sitting there on the wall, just kind of, maybe it was right here, right? And it's just watching me, right? It's so small that I probably wouldn't notice it, right? So a fly on the wall is able to observe without being a distraction, okay? That's a fly on the wall. Fly around my head is a distraction. Fly on the wall, not a distraction, right? So what we want to do when we observe the organization is we want as much as possible to be a fly on the wall. We want to watch people perform their activities without having to take them away from their activities. Remember the interview, when we take them and we take a time to interview them, we're taking them away from their job, right? They're not performing their tasks while they're being interviewed. This is our opportunity to observe them perform their tasks, right? Okay, a couple of advantages and disadvantages of using observation, right? Right, we can see what is being done. We can watch people do their job, right? So if there was someone in my office right now watching me teach this lecture, they could see things like, oh, well, it's nice that he has 2 monitors, right? So then that way he can keep one monitor having the class up on Teams and one monitor that has the slide up so that he can share his screen, and that he can see if he only had one monitor, he couldn't be able to do that, right? And so that's a good thing, right? They might also see some of the problems that come about as I'm trying to do things, okay? Or if they were to observe my wife sometimes trying to use this computer to be able to type a message. It's the keyboard. I can show it to you if you can see it. The keyboard is a Turkish keyboard, but it's English programmatically, right? Which means that not all the keys match up, right? So they could see the problems that my wife is having with that, and they might say, well, what this guy needs to be able to type a message is he needs an English keyboard, right? Or something like that. Right? It's relatively inexpensive in that, again, we're not taking people away from their job. We are not paying them for hours where they're not doing tasks related to their job, right? Because remember, with the interview, if we take someone and we interview them as part of it, they're not going to do that for free, right? They're an employee of the company and they're doing something for the company, so they are still getting paid, even though they're not doing tasks related directly with their job description. Let's see. Some of the disadvantages of the observation is people, definitely, knowingly or unknowingly, subconsciously, perform differently when being observed. It's just a fact of human nature that if I know that someone's watching me do my job, I'm going to, or really watching me do anything, I am probably going to perform differently than if I thought they weren't there, right? So say, for example, as you're driving your car, if you know that a certain stretch of the highway, a certain stretch of the road is monitored by traffic cameras, you're going to drive differently than if you know that they're not being monitored by traffic cameras, right? So we may not be getting completely accurate information in that situation, okay? Observing tasks, different levels of difficulty or volume during that time period, we may miss those things. So let me give you an example. My mother, she does taxes. So in America, we don't have the nice automatic tax system like you guys have here in Turkey. Basically, you pay taxes out of your paycheck in America, and at the end of the year, you're given this document that tells you how much you've paid in taxes and how much you made in income, right? Yes, IRS knows how much you owe them, but they don't tell you. Yeah, exactly. You know where I'm going with this. So you know this somehow, Metahan. Okay. So what people like my mom, what they do is they calculate how much, based on your income and other factors, how much you should pay in taxes. And then they look at the amount that you did pay in taxes. And one of two things, never is that amount the exact same. Like I bet that, I would be surprised if that has ever happened, right? But for some people, they paid more taxes than they should have, so the government is going to send them money back. For probably most people, they didn't pay enough, and so they need to pay the IRS. They need to pay them the amount they should have paid, the difference, right? Basically, we have until April 15th. That's the big day this every year. Is April 15th to be able to get that information into the IRS and get that money to the IRS. So my mom's job is from December 31st, when those that information is released, where how much income and how much did you pay in taxes. So when you get those forms in at the beginning of January until April 15th, you have to get that information into the IRS. Well, that means that those 3.5 months, January 1st through April 15th, is really busy for people like my mom, right? The rest of the year is not nearly as busy, but those 3.5 months is really, really busy, right? But those are also the 3 months you don't want to be doing. You don't want to be doing system changes, right, during that time, because you don't want to be doing major system upgrades or system changes in the middle of the busy time, right? So if somebody were to come in and say, well, we want to do a new system and we're going to observe the tax preparers, we're going to observe them, and we're going to do it during a time during a slow period, so it's going to be like we're going to observe them in September or October. Well, they would miss a lot of activities and a lot of tasks that people like my mom would be doing, right? Because that is not the busy period. They need to observe, you know, my mom and people like her, they need to observe them during the busy times, right? Maybe interview them during the non-busy times, but they need to observe them during the busy times so that they can be able to understand really a lot of the tasks that they are being involved with, right? One final note on here, some tasks may not always be performed in the manner in which they observed because different people might do things differently. So for example, back to that system, the Turkish English system, Goç system that I was talking about, different people have different solutions to how to get beyond this problem, right? So basically what I do is I just do the whole thing in Turkish because I know enough Turkish to be able to do that. Other people have to do a different thing to be able to get through that particular task, right? So if someone were to observe me doing a task, they might see something very differently than if they were to observe my friend doing the same task. Okay. Oh, well, so I ran over a little bit. It's 2:23. All right, so we'll end this discussion there. As I had announced last week, we're going to have a quiz today. So the quiz will be done as an online form through this channel. It will begin at 2:30, and then you will have an end time of 3:10 and the close time of 3:20. So you won't be able to submit the form after 3:20. But if there are no questions, then we will end our time for today there. Then basically the second hour of this time will be the quiz for you guys to take. All right. Are there any questions before we end? Or any comments? William, you had a comment, question?
Making sure you have executive support is really important, and always making sure you have a budget. I've been on many IT projects where there's no budget, and that makes things extremely difficult.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you. All right, guys, well, have a good afternoon, and I will be available if anyone has any questions about this. I'll leave this channel open for if anybody has any questions during the quiz time. All right, have a good afternoon. See you guys tomorrow.